away from her, you...
A sequel is usually a mere shadow of the original. A legal robbery of the fandom, its weapons of choice, glamorous movie trailers, and Easter egg promises that entice you with hope to see more of what you loved the first time. But most fans stumble away from the scene of the crime confused as to whether that knot in their stomach is from stale popcorn or a huge helping of disappointment. But once in a while, a sequel comes along that makes you consider whether it might even be better than the original. And this is exactly what happened when the sequel of Alien hit theaters on July 19, 1986. Aliens, one of the greatest films of the 80s, had moviegoers leaving theaters repeating iconic lines like, "Game over, man!"
And they mostly come at night.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Fans will argue to this day over which movie is better. And while everyone has their own personal take, one fan said, Alien is the better film, but Aliens is a whole lot more fun to watch. The sequel would expand the franchise's scope by adding to the series' backstory and factions, by giving us a first look at the company, introducing the Colonial Marines, and taking Ellen Ripley to the next level by giving her a mama bear complex. Those aliens never had a chance. And can you imagine? They could barely kill one alien the first time. What could they do against dozens? Nightmare-fueled fun would take Aliens to number 5 in the 1986 domestic box office, the same spot as Alien in 1979. While the incredible success of Aliens would ultimately cement the Alien franchise for the future, the story about how it was made will leave you astonished that this movie made it to the big screen at all. Oh yeah, and it helped launch the career of yet another legendary director. The experience of watching Aliens would not only leave us wanting more, but it leaves us with many questions too. Why did the studio drag its feet on a sequel? Why was the movie named Aliens instead of Alien 2? How did T almost ruin the film? And what was it about the script that nearly made Sigourney Weaver pass on making the movie at all? Well, you are about to find out, because this is the definitive history of Aliens, and you've never heard it told like this before. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do so now, and give us a thumbs up if you want more videos like this. When Alien crushed the box office in 1979, earning more than $100 million, sequel talks began almost immediately. Brandywine Productions, who helped foster Alien to the big screen, was fully intent on making a sequel, and Alan Ladd Jr., the president of 20th Century Fox at the time, fully backed the project. It was full steam ahead for Alien 2. And then things changed. Ladd had been frustrated with 20th Century Fox chairman Dennis Stanfill and wanted more creative control over the projects he greenlit, like Star Wars and Alien. He was also frustrated because his staff wasn't being compensated well enough for their efforts. So in late 1979, Ladd decided he wouldn't re-up his contract and decided to start his own production company instead. A huge gamble, quitting his $2 million a year job, but that's what being responsible for movies like Star Wars and Alien will do for your confidence. And while he would never quite be able to reproduce his success with Star Wars and Alien, the Ladd Company would go on to produce hits like Blade Runner, Braveheart, and The Right Stuff. Perhaps a great move for Ladd, but for Brandywine, this was a disaster. Brandywine's executives, Walter Hill, David Giler, and Gordon Carroll, were still friends with Fox, basking in the incredible success they were sharing with Alien. But Ladd's departure brought in Norman Levy to run the studio. And the problem was, Levy didn't like Alien, and he didn't want a sequel to the movie. He thought it would be a disaster, although he would later walk that back, saying he always wanted to make the movie. But history doesn't corroborate. In fact, after Levy took over, Fox suddenly claimed Alien was a financial loss to the company. He claimed the movie lost $2 million in the 11 months following its release, despite earning more than $100 million against an $11 million budget. Industry accountants would call it creative Hollywood accounting, used to disguise Fox's revenue in order to limit payments to their partner Brandywine.
I don't know which species is worse. You don't see them f***ing each other over for a goddamn percentage.
When Fox refused a sequel, Brandywine sued them. It would take 4 years, but finally in 1983, Fox agreed to settle the suit by financing development of Alien 2. Would they be able to find another Ridley Scott, whose life-altering experience with Star Wars had led him to Alien? Even more than Ridley Scott, James Cameron's life direction was totally altered by Star Wars. The college dropout truck driver, whose hobby had been learning the movie-making process, walked out of the theater in 1977 and quit his job to get in the movie business. After creating a 12-minute short called Xenogenesis, Cameron showed up on the doorstep of Roger Corman's little production company, New World Pictures, and wanted to be hired as a production assistant. They saw he had the talent and hunger and gave him the job. Ironically, had O'Bannon and Shusett sold Alien to Corman, it would have likely been the first film Cameron worked on. As Cameron was working through Corman's ranks, he saw Alien and was stunned.
Well, I've had a few, I would say fairly profound experiences in a cinema, and one of them was the opening night of Alien.
He was so impressed by the world, the characters, and the design Scott had created. He thought Scott set the bar very high for science fiction moving forward. During the previous 4 years, Cameron had graduated from the School of Corman and wrote a script called The Terminator. Filming for The Terminator was supposed to begin in early 1983, with Cameron directing. But Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was playing the Terminator, had been optioned for 9 months while filming Conan the Destroyer. So while he waited, Cameron accepted a job co-writing Rambo First Blood Part 2 with Sylvester Stallone. During that time, Brandywine got their hands on the Terminator script.
I had been given the script of Terminator to read. I thought the script was really great. And then when I met Jim, okay, this is the guy.
David Giler would think, well, he knows Alien better than we do. In November 1983, Cameron submitted a 42-page film treatment for Alien 2.
Cameron's challenge was how to top the first one,
which he'd written in 3 days. It was based on Giler and Hill's suggestion of Ripley and soldiers. It was a cross between the 1981 Southern Comfort film and The Magnificent Seven. But the treatment failed to impress Fox. One of the executives told Cameron it was a wall-to-wall horror show and it needed more character development. Fox was so down on Alien they tried to sell it to the producers of Rambo, but the lawyers couldn't get the deal done. Meanwhile, Cameron took his downtime waiting for Arnold and kept working on the script until it was time to start shooting Terminator. He had completed 90 pages and was in the second act. Fox read it and loved it. They agreed to wait for Cameron to finish making Terminator so he could complete the script. But he didn't just want to write the script, he wanted to direct. Fox agreed that if Terminator was successful, then they'd let him direct Alien 2. And successful it was. The film premiered on October 26, 1984, and was #1 at the box office. It remained #1 for 2 weeks.
If Terminator hadn't been such a success when it premiered, I doubt that Jim would have been brought on to direct.
Cameron went to a meeting with Fox executives who needed to give the final approval, which included a budget, Cameron to direct, and his partner and girlfriend Gail Ann Hurd to produce. Hurd had been an assistant and producer for Roger Corman. During the deliberation, Cameron turned his script over and wrote the word alien on the back side of the last page. Then he drew 2 vertical lines through the S and held it up to show them. Cameron would say maybe it was seeing the $sign so close to Alien, or maybe it was the confidence I was projecting. But they said yes, and Alien 2 became Aliens. Although there was still a huge battle over the budget and the star to come. Some fans have wondered why Ridley Scott didn't direct the second movie, and the truth is, he was never asked. Scott believed it was because he was so difficult to work with on the original. But if they wanted to follow up a strong female lead performance with another one, they had the right guy for the job. Cameron was a champion of the strong female heroine, feeling like it distinguished his films from typical Hollywood action movies. Sarah Connor had learned how to fend for herself in The Terminator, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do with Ripley. To keep her square in his mind, he wrote the script with a picture of Sigourney Weaver on his desk. Cameron said if the first movie was a haunted attraction, this one would be a roller coaster. But before Cameron could get started, Fox had some conditions. Hurd insisted they could make the movie for $15.5 million, but the studio estimator said it would cost $35 million. Fox said they would make the movie for $12 million. So Cameron and Hurd quit, saying, "Thanks, we'll do something else." Fox would eventually relent, and Cameron and Hurd came back to the film. But in April, Fox tried to put its foot down again. They didn't want Weaver to return as Ripley. They were afraid she would demand too much money.
Do we really need her?
Cameron and Hurd insisted that Weaver, and only Weaver, play the lead. When Fox insisted that they'd make Aliens with or without Weaver, Cameron and Hurd quit again. and they went on a honeymoon in Hawaii. When they returned, Fox had relented again.
I suddenly get this fat script.
Weaver would be in the movie, and she would make $1 million plus a percentage of the profits, the most money she had made at this time in her career. But Weaver had some concerns herself. She loved Cameron's script and provided input on what she thought her character would and wouldn't say or do. But she needed to be convinced that Fox wasn't just doing this as a cash grab. The story took place with Ripley waking up from her hypersleep 57 years after her battle with the creature and put into a position where she would have to go back and battle more of the creatures once again. Once she was convinced the movie was going to be good, she was concerned about the extensive use of guns in the film. It took some convincing, but Cameron was able to convey to her how important the guns would be. She also didn't like the idea that her character hated the aliens so much now that she just wanted to go back and kill as many of them as possible. But when they got to Newt, both she and Cameron bonded over the idea that her actual purpose was to save this little girl. The next step for Cameron was putting together a team that could bring his vision to life.
I'm alive and I'm putting together a team.
He was able to bring back Ron Cobb, who had worked on the first movie. He was also able to get conceptual artist Sid Mead, who worked on Blade Runner and 2010, The Year We Make Contact. He really wanted to bring back H.R. Giger, but he was already obligated to Poltergeist 2, and the Alien creator was disappointed he couldn't work on the film.
I'm depressed about the work I did and it was no more.
So Cameron reached back to Sam Winston, who had helped him with The Terminator. With the artists and Sigourney Weaver in place, they needed to cast the rest of the actors. Because they would be filming in London to save money, before they could bring any actors from the United States, they had to go through all of the British actors in the North American registry, as well as anyone who thought they could do a passable American accent. But casting in the UK was difficult because Cameron wanted actors who were going to be on the cutting edge of the American military, and it was tough to find people with that mentality. They would go through about 3,000 actors in the UK alone. One of the good ones they found was Jeanette Goldstein, who played Private Vasquez.
I only need to know one thing: where they are.
She was born in Los Angeles and had trained as a gymnast before starting her acting career. She was living in London doing fringe theater. When she came into audition, she thought it was for a movie about immigration. She had no idea it was the sequel to Alien. So she wasn't dressed for the part at all. But luckily, the blouse she was wearing was sleeveless, which showed off her muscular arms. And if you look closely in the movie, she had brown makeup and contact lenses applied to make her look like the correct ethnicity for Private Vasquez. While frowned upon today, that was pretty normal for the era at that time. Goldstein later said that the role was originally supposed to go to two-time Miss Olympia Rachel McLish, who was going through acting lessons at the time, but dropped out saying she would never swear as it was against her religion. Cameron had to get studio approval for Goldstein and stuck to his gun saying, "This is the girl."
He said, "This is who I want." So I'm glad he is the bastard that he is.
This was Goldstein's first movie, and it would kickstart a career that included Lethal Weapon 2, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Star Trek Generations, and Titanic. Mark Ralston, who played Private Drake, was another American actor living in the UK. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland, but traveled at 17 to do a junior year abroad. He ended up staying there and going into acting. Aliens was also his first movie and would launch a career that included RoboCop 2, The Shawshank Redemption, and Midway, as well as more than 80 television roles. 10-year-old Carrie Henn wasn't even an actress when she was selected to play Newt. It turned out to be very difficult to find a child near London that can do an American accent. Her father was an American stationed at RAF Lakenheath, and her mother was English. The other children they had auditioned with acting experience was used to auditioning for commercials, so they would smile after delivering their lines, which just wasn't appropriate for a girl suffering from traumatic stress.
It's not quite as good, but...
Carrie had none of that conditioning, and she had the look that they wanted. After Aliens, Henn would win a Saturn Award for Best Performance by a Younger Actress, but acting would not be in her future. She eventually graduated from California State University Stanislaus and became a schoolteacher. In 2016, she attended San Diego Comic-Con for the 30th anniversary reunion of the Aliens cast members.
You never said anything about an android being on board, why not?
But not all of the actors could be found in the UK, so Cameron and Hurd reached back to the United States and some old friends. Lance Henriksen, who played Bishop, went all the way back to Cameron's first directed movie, Piranha 2.
If Bishop didn't work out, I was going to quit acting.
Henriksen had supported Cameron during what would be a difficult shoot, and they became friends. Their working relationship would continue when Cameron did The Terminator, as Lance was originally cast to play the killer robot, until everyone realized Schwarzenegger was the obvious choice. Friends or not, Henriksen still had to audition for the part of Bishop.
So Jim auditioned me, and I used what I thought was right for the role. I was following some really great performances.
He was concerned about how he would play the role, considering the recent portrayal of androids with Ian Holm in Alien and Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner.
And I thought, how am I going to compete with it? And then I realized, you can't compete with it.
Henriksen decided to play the android like an innocent child who pitied the short-lived humans. Henriksen's acting would continue to solidify the importance of the android story in the Alien franchise going forward. After Aliens, he would go on to act in more than 230 roles on the big and small screen.
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man.
When someone thinks of the movie Aliens, there is typically one line that always comes to mind.
That's it, man. It's game over, man. It's game over.
Bill Paxton had already worked with Cameron as a set builder for Roger Corman and in a small role on The Terminator. But despite that, he was still nervous at his audition for Hudson over the 4th of July weekend in 1985. He thought he had overacted and was way over the top, and he didn't think he'd ever hear from the director. But when Weird Science came out less than a month later, Paxton's character Chet helped seal the deal.
You're dead meat, Pilgrim.
As it would turn out, Paxton's take on Hudson was exactly what Cameron was looking for. Hudson would be the release valve for the audience's tension.
Yo! Stop your grinning and drop your linen.
His fear and ridiculous comments would allow the audience to release their anxiety and then let it build back up again. After Aliens, Paxton would go on to memorable roles in movies like Tombstone, Apollo 13, Twister, and Titanic. He died tragically in 2017 due to complications following a surgery that would later be deemed a wrongful death. He was 61 years old. James Cameron, who was not known as a sentimental guy, would say the biggest regret in his life is that he didn't tell Bill he loved him when he spoke to him before the surgery. The role of Lieutenant Gorman was played by Canadian actor William Hope, who had joined the National Youth Theatre in London after high school. He initially read for the part of Hudson, but Cameron brought him back in later to read for Gorman, and he was cast. Hope turned down a major role in Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket to play Gorman. Hope would continue to do movies but found a calling in voiceover work. He would spend more than a decade doing multiple voices for the Thomas the Tank Engine TV series.
He's a really useful engine.
Unlike the rest of the actors who played Colonial Marines, Al Matthews, who played Sergeant Apone, was the real deal. Before becoming an actor, Matthews spent 6 years in the United States Marine Corps and served during the Vietnam War, receiving 2 Purple Hearts. After Aliens, Matthews would go on to do parts in Tomorrow Never Dies and The Fifth Element, among others. He passed away at home in Spain in 2018. He was 75 years old.
Another glorious day in the Corps.
It wouldn't be an Alien movie without an ends justify the means guy. In the first movie, it would be Ash, and because of that, we'd believe that Bishop was the guy in this movie. But surprise, it was seemingly well-meaning and understanding Burke, played by Paul Reiser. Aliens was Reiser's first major role after a small part in Beverly Hills Cop in 1984. He recalled reading the script for Aliens and the experience being different than most other scripts he'd read. The story really jumped off the page. Several other actors said the same thing about Cameron's script. Ultimately, it was Reiser's kindness, empathy, and charm during the audition that got him the role. Cameron was looking for someone the audience wouldn't immediately suspect as the corporate bad guy. And for the most part, it worked. Reiser became famous after Aliens as a comic, and his TV series Mad About You became very popular in the 90s.
You're not my servant. You're my new friend.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. I go scrub toilet.
For the role of Hicks, Michael Biehn wasn't the first choice. The role actually went to James Remar, who had played an Alien producer Walter Hill's The Warriors in 1979 and 48 Hours with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy in 1982. He landed the role in Aliens in a large part because of his relationship with Hill, but was only on set for about 2 weeks. The story for many years was that he had urgent matters at home that he needed to attend to, and he returned to the States to deal with them. The truth would eventually come out that Remar had a drug problem and had been arrested while in London. He had found some local drug dealers and he bought heroin from them. The police found out and raided his hotel room. As a result, he was fired from the picture.
I got goosebumps talking about this. I didn't just screw myself. I screwed other people.
It would take 12 years before Hill would hire him again because he had made him look bad. Remar would go on to a very successful career, acting in more than 150 productions following Aliens. And if you look closely when the Colonial Marines are entering the hive, Remar is still in the film. The production was unable to reshoot the scene and instead used editing to cut away once Remar turns his head. But being 2 weeks into filming and with such a tight budget, Cameron needed someone for Hicks fast, someone he could trust, someone like the Terminator's Kyle Reese. Michael Biehn got the call and he was on set in 2 days. Biehn brought a whole different energy to the part than Remar, a more calm, cool, and collected personality. As it would turn out, it was exactly the male co-lead Weaver needed. Biehn would go on to be in several great movies including The Abyss, Navy SEALs, Tombstone, and The Rock.
It's the only way to be sure.
Filming began in September 1985 at Pinewood Studios, where Alien had been filmed. Cameron had 75 days and $15.5 million to make his movie. Blade Runner, Return of the Jedi, Rambo 2, and Ghostbusters had been made for $28 million, $32.5 million, $44 million, and $30 million respectively. Aliens had basically half the budget of these other films, and Cameron and Hurd were personally responsible financially for any overages for their movie. The original Fox budget estimates of $35 million was probably more accurate in any other director's hands, but they had Cameron. But this was only the first of several unexpected challenges that would come along the way. The first thing Cameron did was put his cast into a boot camp so they could learn how to handle weapons and become a unit. Matthews used his real-life Marine experience to help train the other actors. During that training and before Remar left the production, Matthews had been teaching everyone to never point a weapon at someone and never walk around with your finger on the trigger. Unfortunately, Remar made a mistake and blew a hole in the wall of Frank Oz's 1986 Little Shop of Horrors set with a shotgun. Luckily, they were using blanks, but it still did quite a bit of damage. Shooting had a few dangerous disasters, including the APC vehicle brakes going out and taking out 2 cameras that only a moment before had cameramen behind them. Also, in the scene where the aliens are killing the Marines, they are running back to the APC. One of the flamethrowers lit the APC on fire, which caused a toxic gas from the plastic on the set that suffocated the actors. And during another shoot, the roof of the APC caved in and nearly crushed an actor. The vehicle being used as the APC was a 747 airport towing vehicle with armor placed over it, and it was a very powerful vehicle. They were lucky no one was killed on set. But that was just a start for some of the trouble. Cameron, coming from the school of Roger Corman, was tough, moved fast, and knew exactly what he wanted, and expected the same thing from his crew. The only problem was his British crew had a totally different way of making movies, and the two ideologies would clash from the very beginning. And to make matters worse, they had no idea who James Cameron was, and they didn't really care.
I didn't know who Jim Cameron was. I mean, it meant nothing.
They thought of Alien as their movie, and a remake should be done by Ridley Scott.
If anyone should be doing a sequel, it should be Ridley.
It didn't help that The Terminator hadn't come out in the UK yet, so thinking it would help show who he was, Cameron set up a showing for his movie. The problem was, no one showed up. At the time, there was a sense to the British that you don't get to the top of your profession through talent, you get there by paying your dues and putting in your time. The problem was, Cameron was 31, and they didn't care about his talent. They would have learned a lot about Cameron had they seen The Terminator, but they really didn't want to know who he was. Cameron was shocked to be working with people who couldn't care less about the film they were working on, and tensions began to build right away. Cameron was used to working 6 or 7 days a week, all hours of the day, just to get his movies made. But for the local crew, this was just a job for them, and they worked at a slower pace. Cameron leaned on Hurd to keep the crew moving. But because she was married to James, the British crew didn't respect her, assuming she got the job because she was his wife. They couldn't be more wrong. but they despised Cameron and Hurd, and the feeling was mutual.
Who are these Americans to come over here and think they know what's best?
She would pressure them not to have tea time and to work extra hours.
Twice a day.
Everything stops for tea.
It's tea time, mate.
It got so bad she threatened to fire the entire crew and hire a new one. Because she was so tough, the crew would grudgingly come together. But things stayed tense and would then boil over. Cameron's problems would continue with director of photography Dick Bush, was extremely experienced and had his own ideas of how to light the set, essentially doing the opposite of whatever Cameron was asking him to do. Cameron had a vision of what the movie would look like, and while Bush was good at his job, he just couldn't see it and refused to do it his way. With support from Brandywine, Cameron would fire Bush.
F this. Taking a break for tea. No, we have a movie to make. Let's make a movie.
But make no bones about it, Cameron was a taskmaster on the film and could do anyone's job except the actors. And he wasn't afraid to let them know exactly what he wanted.
Guys, I want you to pull it so that it looks like it's leaping. It doesn't look like it's leaping.
And this created a lot of tension on the set. Frustration would get the better of Cameron when the crew would take 2 breaks per day for tea on a schedule, no matter what he was about to film. It was tea at 10 a.m., then a long lunch with the crew going to the pub, then back to filming for a few hours, and then tea again at 4 p.m.
Tea time.
It wasn't that they were doing something wrong, it was the way they worked, and it wasn't conducive to a movie with this small of a budget and this little time. The worst of it came when assistant director Derek Cracknell continued to butt heads with Cameron and refused to set up his shots the way he wanted them, thinking the director had not done enough to earn his position. Cameron fired Cracknell, and at Cracknell's urging, in the middle of the shooting day, the Pinewood crew put down their tools and stopped work in protest. Cameron and Hurd were in a delicate situation. At that time, England was busy with film shoots, and there wasn't another crew they could bring in immediately. They called 20th Century Fox and tried to decide what to do. Cameron wanted to move the shoot out of England, but it would be Sigourney Weaver who would save the day. She had been in the first movie, she knew the crew, and she was the only one with enough clout to do something. She had a meeting with Cameron and Hurd and spoke up for the cast and crew. After the meeting, Cameron came out and addressed the crew, apologizing and taking some responsibility for pushing everyone too hard. Cameron addressed the group with his characteristic frankness. "Look, this is a really important movie to me," he said. "This is my first studio movie. We have had an almost impossible shooting schedule and I need everyone's help. I can't do this on my own. But I also can't have a situation where it seems like the crew is working to prove that the endeavor is going to be a failure. If you have a problem with that, you've got to step forward because we've got to replace you." The meeting lasted for hours as crew members aired their grievances about the long hours. At the end of the day, the assistant director's staff agreed to be more supportive of Cameron, and he to be more sensitive to tea time.
Tea time!
While no real warm feeling ever developed between the director and his British crew, things improved enough for them to finish the movie, and they had a huge finish. The first Alien movie had one monster. Aliens had many more, and a queen. Someone had to be laying all those eggs, right? When Cameron wrote the script, he knew this movie was going to be about mothers. He was raised by a strong woman, he wanted strong women in his movies, and he was going to have 2 strong females go at it for the finale. Once Ripley lights the queen alien's eggs on fire, she comes after her and they end up in a climatic battle of the power loader versus the alien, with Weaver delivering that classic line,
"Get away from her, you bitch!"
It may be one of the best science fiction movie scenes of all time, but if they didn't shoot it right, the movie would be done. It would turn out to be a ballet of visual effects, with more than 24 people to work the wires of the power loader, the arms and legs and claws of the alien, and the tongue shooting at Weaver's face. It ended up being a huge success.
It was an unprecedented creature effects build.
Some interesting notes from the production include the scene where Hudson asks Bishop to do the knife trick, and then Bishop puts his hand over Hudson's and proceeds to stab him between the fingers. Paxton didn't know Henriksen and Cameron had decided not to tell him him that his hand would be part of the trick. They initially tried to slow down the camera to speed up Lance Henriksen's trick, but it didn't work. So the speed you see in the movie is actually how fast Lance was doing the trick. He'd practiced it for months before filming began and was very good at it, although he did pinch Paxton's pinky, giving him a blood blister.
Before we started shooting, I went to Jim and said, what if I put my hand on top of Bill's hand and do the knife trick?
Trust me.
Cameron shot the scenes where we first meet the Colonial Marines last, so the camaraderie of being together was more realistic because the actors had spent months filming together already. Also, if you ever wondered why the planet was called LV-426 in the movie, it's because a name was never mentioned in the first movie, so Cameron gave it one. In the script, it was named Acheron, but Cameron decided to use LV-426 because it sounded like a navigational reference point. Despite fans trying to attach some hidden meaning to it, it was just a cool name Cameron came up with. Principal photography concluded in January 1986 on time and on budget. Composer James Horner, who had created the music for Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan and Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, was hired to create the music for Aliens, but a tight schedule would only allow him to work on the film for 7 weeks. When he arrived in London to perform his duties, Cameron was still shooting, so he had to wait. Horner would only work on the score for about 2 weeks before having to leave to score another film. With only 6 weeks until theatrical release, there was no time to push the schedule back. Like Jerry Goldsmith before him on Alien, Horner wasn't particularly happy with the treatment of his score for the film because Cameron had to heavily chop up the music to fit his edits, as well as use music from Goldsmith's Alien score in some places. Horner would end up with an Oscar nomination for his music on Aliens, and despite some hard feelings, eventually come back and score Titanic for Cameron in 1997. Horner would tragically be killed in a single-engine airplane crash 60 miles north of Santa Barbara in 2015. He was 61 years old. Editing on Aliens would be a huge undertaking, and Ray Lovejoy was responsible for helping Cameron realize his vision. Lovejoy had edited 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Shining, and was a good editor, but he wasn't prepared for the speed Cameron needed him to work. The director was seriously considering firing Lovejoy and having the film re-edited from scratch by Mark Goldblatt, who edited The Terminator. Upon hearing that his job was in danger, Lovejoy grabbed all the footage from the film's final battle, locked himself in an editing suite over the weekend, and presented the fully edited version of the battle to Cameron the following week. The effort paid off, because Cameron was sufficiently impressed to let Lovejoy stay on board and supervise what was intended to be the final edit. Lovejoy later received an Oscar nomination for Best Film Editing. After the long and difficult shoot, Cameron addressed the crew by saying the one thing that kept him going through it all was the certain knowledge that one day I would drive out of Pinewood and never come back, and that you sorry bastards would still be here. Cameron indeed never came back to Pinewood Studios. Alien was released on July 18th with a tagline, "This time it's war." It opened in more than 1,400 theaters and in many cases with lines around the block even on weekday afternoons. At the film's premiere, Paul Reiser's sister physically struck him because his character was so contemptible.
My sister punched me. Like, she just couldn't separate.
The movie earned $10.1 million in its opening weekend and more than $85 million in the United States by the end of its run. Box office numbers are inconsistent worldwide for 1986, but it's believed Aliens was the 4th highest grossing film of the year, behind Platoon, Crocodile Dundee, and Top Gun. The studio was very happy with the success of the movie and pushed it for an Oscar run. It would be nominated for 7 Academy Awards, winning 2 for Best Sound Effects Editing and Best Visual Effects. Sigourney Weaver got a Best Actress nomination, which was the first for a science fiction movie. Aliens was the most awarded of all the Alien movies in the franchise, and marketing experts later said that Aliens probably helped save Fox, which was in desperate need of a hit at the time.
Our next movie is named Aliens. The movie is scary and horrifying and disgusting. It's very well made.
Aliens was released on VHS in 1987, and a modified cut that included deleted scenes from the theatrical release was broadcast on CBS in 1989. In 1991, even more footage came out on Laserdisc, including the opening scene of Newt's family investigating the derelict spacecraft. The extended cut of Aliens, which was released on VHS and DVD in 1999 as part of the Alien Legacy box set, is 20 minutes longer than the theatrical version at 157 minutes. From toys to video games, comics, and novels, Aliens has been an icon of pop culture for nearly 40 years.
I don't know that a lot of kids are going, I'm back, alien.
But you know you've made an impact on society when you make it to a national museum. In 2003, 20th Century Fox donated one of the eggs used while filming Aliens to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. In 2023, a curator would deem it a prop egg from marketing for Alien 3, but Fox never confirmed it. Regardless, when your prop is sitting next to Rocky Balboa's robe, you know you're an iconic franchise. Not only is Aliens widely considered one of the best sequels ever made, but in many ways, the movie set a new standard for action in cinema. Ellen Ripley went from an independent, resilient, and resourceful woman in Alien to a badass mama bear in Aliens that hit a chord with moviegoers, making her one of the most complex, emotionally driven, and layered movie protagonists of all time. It would set the stage for movies like Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Kill Bill, and Mad Max Fury Road, to name just a few. Some fans would call Aliens the pinnacle of the Alien franchise, and while there's arguments either way, we want to know what you think. Is Aliens your favorite movie of the franchise, or do you have another? What's your favorite and least favorite parts of the film? And besides Ripley, which character do you like best? Share with us in the comments below. We'd love to talk with you about it. Also, this video was originally the second section of a larger video called The Definitive History of the Alien Franchise, but YouTube's complicated algorithm wouldn't allow us to release it all as one video. If you haven't already seen the first part, Alien, a link to it will be at the very end of this video. Also, in the near future, we will be releasing the definitive history of the rest of the Alien franchise, which includes Alien 3, Resurrection, AVP, Prometheus, Covenant, Romulus, and yes, even Alien Earth. This will all come out as a third video on YouTube. But if you don't want to wait and you would like to see it now, just click on the join button and become a member of the channel, where you also get sneak peeks of upcoming histories, as well as live shows with us talking about the making of these videos. And once again, thank you for supporting the channel. We couldn't do this without you. A link is about to pop up that will take you directly to these limited collector's edition designs. Every dollar earned goes towards making our next video. Don't forget to get a nice discount by using coupon code THEPOPCAST at checkout. And if you enjoyed the definitive history of Aliens, watch From Alien 3 to Romulus, the definitive history of the Alien franchise right now. Until next time,